You've heard the story, right? A magnificent island civilization, a true paradise, that gets swallowed by the sea in a single, terrible day and night. For most of history, it was just that, a story, a myth. But then, geologists started finding things. So today, we're kicking off our new series on lost civilizations with the biggest one of them all, Atlantis.
I mean, just think about that. For over 2,000 years, this was written off as a simple cautionary tale. But as our technology gets better, as we peel back the secrets of the deep ocean and start to understand the truly violent history of our planet, the line between myth and memory, well, it's starting to get really blurry. We are finding clues that suggest the story might be terrifyingly real.
So in this explainer, we're going to dive deep. We're going to look at the original text, we're going to weigh the scientific theories, and we are going to look at the hard evidence. By the end, you'll have everything you need to make up your own mind. Is Atlantis just a myth? Or is it the greatest unsolved mystery in human history? Let's start the search.
Okay, so to really get to the bottom of Atlantis, you have to start at the beginning. And there's only one beginning, one source. And the man who wrote it down, he isn't just part of the story. He is the first and maybe the biggest part of the puzzle. See, the man who gave us the Atlantis story wasn't some poet or, a fantasy writer. This was Plato, the Plato, a guy whose entire life's work was a search for truth, all grounded in logic and reason. He just wasn't known for making things up. So when a mind like that writes in incredible detail about an advanced civilization that just vanished, you have to stop and ask why.
And what's really fascinating is that Plato goes out of his way to say the story isn't his. He lays out its history, claiming it was passed down to him. The story, he says, was first told to the famous Athenian lawmaker Solon by Egyptian priests who were literally reading from ancient records in their temples. They talked about this forgotten piece of history, this massive empire from the Atlantic that was just gone. Plato presents it like he's a historian, preserving a true account.
And that is the absolute core of the dilemma. I mean, sure, Plato used made-up stories, allegories, to make philosophical points all the time. But was Atlantis just another one? A cautionary tale about a perfect society getting arrogant and being destroyed for it? Or was he actually recording a real folk memory? A story passed down for generations about a real catastrophe, one that had been forgotten by basically everyone except these record keepers in Egypt.
But here's the thing. If Atlantis was just a philosophical story, Plato did something really weird. He filled it with this incredible level of specific technical detail, stuff that just isn't in his other fables. Honestly, it reads less like a myth and more like an architect's blueprint.
This is where the story gets strangely precise. Plato describes the capital city, made of these perfect concentric rings of land and water, all linked by massive canals that ships could sail through. He talks about a grand temple covered in gold, silver, and this mysterious reddish metal he called orichalcum. You're going to want to remember that name. He even describes advanced infrastructure, like hot and cold running water piped in from natural springs. I mean, come on. These are not the broad strokes of a fable. This sounds like a real place.
He even gives us a location. He says it was out in the Atlantic Ocean, just past what the Greeks called the Pillars of Hercules. Today we call that the Strait of Gibraltar. And he says this was a massive island, the heart of a huge naval empire. He's not being vague here, he's pointing to a spot on the map.
And then he gives us the date. He says the disaster happened 9,000 years before his time, which puts the destruction of Atlantis at around 9,600 BC. For 2,000 years, everyone pointed to that date as proof that the story was nonsense. It was just way too ancient for any known civilization. But what if it wasn't a mistake? What if that incredibly specific number is actually the single most important clue in this entire mystery?
So, with a location, a blueprint, and a date, the hunt was on. And this isn't just some fringe thing. We're talking about serious geologists and archaeologists who have identified several real-world locations that match up with parts of Plato's description. They've actually created a short list of credible candidates for this lost city.
And when you start comparing Plato's clues to real places, a really interesting pattern shows up. The most famous candidate is probably the Greek island of Santorini. A massive volcanic eruption there around 1600 BC pretty much wiped out the amazing Minoan civilization. It's a perfect match for the story of a naval power destroyed by a catastrophe. But the location is wrong, it's in the Mediterranean, not the Atlantic, and the date is off by thousands of years. But then you look at candidates in the Atlantic, like Spartel Bank. It's a sunken island, an underwater mountain sitting right where Plato said to look. And its timeline? It vanished under the waves when the last ice age ended, right around 9600 BC. The location and the date, It's a scarily perfect match.
So, that's the problem, isn't it? Not a single one of these candidates fits every detail perfectly, which leads to two main ideas. First, maybe Plato just blended memories of several real events, like the Santorini eruption, into one big, powerful story. Or the second, much more exciting possibility, is that the real Atlantis is still out there, just waiting for us to find it.
And this brings us right to the heart of the debate, this central tension that has kept the mystery alive for over 2,000 years. So let's actually weigh the evidence side by side, the case for Atlantis as a myth versus the case for it being a memory of a very real place.
All right, the case for it being a myth is pretty strong. No other ancient writer we know of ever mentions Atlantis. The story's whole theme, a great society destroyed by its own pride, fits perfectly with Plato's other philosophical tales. And yeah, despite what Plato claimed, no Egyptian records of Atlantis have ever turned up. But the arguments for a real place are just as powerful. We now know that oral histories of real catastrophic floods can survive for millennia. The engineering details just seem way too specific for a simple story. And then there's that mysterious metal, or a caucum. For centuries, people just assumed it was fantasy metal. But in 2015, archaeologists found these ancient metal bars in a shipwreck, a rare copper-zinc alloy that perfectly matched Plato's description. All of a sudden, a piece of his fiction was very, very real.
But hang on, there's a clue hidden in Plato's text that is so often overlooked. It's a single piece of data that takes this entire debate out of ancient history and connects it directly to modern, cutting-edge science.
Let's go back to that date one more time, 9,600 BC. Why that exact number? For thousands of years, it was just dismissed as fantasy. But what if it wasn't random? What if Plato, or whoever the story came from, was preserving the memory of a date of real, global importance?
Okay, get ready for this. We now know from ice cores and geology that around 11,600 years ago, which is precisely 9600 BC, the last ice age came to a shocking, violent end. In what was basically a geological blink of an eye, global temperatures shot up, the massive ice sheets collapsed, and sea levels rose catastrophically, wiping out coastlines and submerging huge areas of land that had once been dry. This event has a name, the Younger Dryas termination, and it was a genuine, planet-wide cataclysm.
This is the connection that changes absolutely everything. The date Plato gave for a civilization being destroyed by the ocean perfectly matches the scientific timeline for a real-world event where coastlines all over the planet were drowned by the ocean. It suggests that maybe we've been looking in the wrong time period all along. Maybe Atlantis wasn't a Bronze Age city, but a much older Mesolithic coastal culture, a lost world whose cities and towns would now be hundreds of feet below the waves.
And once you make that geological connection, other weird little details in Plato's story suddenly click into place. He claimed that after Atlantis sank, the sea in that area became impassable because of shoals of mud. Well, that's a perfect description of the shallow, messy, debris-filled water you'd find over a recently sunken landmass, like Spartel Bank. And the name itself, Atlantis, the island of Atlas, points to the mythical titan who held up the sky at the western edge of the world, a place the ancient Greeks believed was in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco, which were right across the strait from Spartel Bank. The clues keep lining up.
Look, this isn't just some dusty old debate. The search for Atlantis is an active investigation, happening right now, using satellite imagery, deep-sea sonar, and even artificial intelligence to scan the parts of our world that we know the least about. And the pace of discovery is really picking up. In just the last decade, researchers found what look like buried concentric rings in Spanish marshlands, an area we know was hammered by ancient tsunamis. And today, AI is literally scanning the seabed for anomalies that fit Plato's blueprint. The science is moving incredibly fast. There's even a leading theory now for what might have caused that whole 9,600 BC catastrophe, a comet that slammed into the North American ice sheet.
But here's the most important fact of all, the one that really blows my mind. For all our amazing technology, we have better maps of the surface of Mars and the Moon than we do of our own planet's seafloor. 3/4 of our oceans remain a blurry, low-resolution mystery. If a city sank 11,600 years ago, there's a very, very good chance it's sitting in a part of our world we have simply never properly looked at. So, this is where we're left. After digging into the philosophy, the geology, and the cutting-edge science, the whole mystery of Atlantis really boils down to two extraordinary and frankly equally mind-bending possibilities. And now, it really is up to you. Was Atlantis a real place?
A civilization lost to a real cataclysm, its ruins still waiting for us out there in the unmapped depths of our oceans? Or was it just Plato's most brilliant story? A cautionary tale so powerful that it's inspired a search for a place that never even existed. A real memory or a perfect myth? We've laid out all the evidence. The final verdict is yours.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more. Share with fellow mystery lovers.